Hi, I'm Danny Pond, and this is my third video, and once again I'm out of ideas, so I thought this week I'd just add to the negativity on the internet and complain about something. I'm going to complain about Microsoft, and why I think they are one of the worst companies in the world, and why I think you should probably stop using their products. Now, Microsoft is a big company, and because of that there are a lot of topics, so I've divided this video into several categories and we'll go over them and I'll explain exactly what I think of all of them. So the first topic, and perhaps the biggest, is Microsoft Windows. Everybody uses this operating system, or at least the vast majority of people use this operating system, and I would really love that to change because I think Windows is the worst operating system. Every other version is usually utterly unusable. I remember the days of Windows ME and how that operating system struggled to start up, run applications and shut down. It was awful. People tend to have this wonderful nostalgic vision of Microsoft Windows in the 90s. It was awful. It was all awful. Things never worked, hardware never worked. The whole thing looked butt ugly. Literally doing anything could result in a blue screen of death. Things weren't good back then. And if things were totally good for you back then, you were quite lucky. You probably had a hardware setup that, for example, had properly written drivers, which was a massive problem and still occasionally can be a problem. Moving on to the millennia, we ended up with Windows Vista that pretty much ran on zero hardware at the time. Amazing operating system, guys. And somehow managed to be worse in every possible way to its predecessor XP, which a lot of people have a lot of love for, but I do not. I think Windows XP was also kind of garbage. That operating system kind of crapped out after 6 months consistently, and you might be thinking, well, Danny, those were the problems of the past. Today it seems to be okay. We've got Windows 10, we've got Windows 11, and honestly, on the forefront, it kind of looks okay to those operating systems. However, I haven't really used them all that much. All I can say is the interface was better than Windows 8. It isn't really a good thing for your operating system if it's known as simply being better than the other version, because the other version was horrendous. Recently, I've taken a laptop that was once just sort of a thing I used to stream stuff to. I used it as like a TV box underneath my television, and I had a version of Linux installed on it, Debian Linux, and it'd just sit there and it'd stream stuff for me, the TV I want to watch and stuff. Going into December, that computer's going to be used a little differently because my sound guy's coming over, Xander, and he's going to be making all the sounds for Spider-Bro, the second Spider-Bro that's coming out next year. The problem is, the software he wants doesn't really work on Linux, which is kind of a problem with Linux in some respects. It's getting less so nowadays, but Ableton Live, which is his software of choice, will not run on Linux. So to install that, I put Windows on this laptop, and oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Now this laptop, it's not the best thing ever. It's not the worst thing ever either though. It's got a hard drive, which is kind of dated, I get it. It's also got onboard graphics, which is not great, but as a laptop person, I'm kind of used to that, so that doesn't necessarily bother me. But the CPU seems quite capable, at least until you put Windows on it, and then the whole thing crashes to a halt. It's awful. So yeah, a little bit of an old laptop, not the worst thing in the world. I'd say debatably quite usable. I was able to stream television to it perfectly fine, and I'm sure it'd be ordinarily quite easy to put Office software on it. If it wasn't for the fact that Microsoft Windows now just assumes that every computer has an SSD or something, because ever since I put Windows 10 on that thing, the hard drive light, it has never turned off. It is hammering the hard drive. I have no idea what they're doing. So for those wanting debatably a smoother, better experience that's a lot better designed, this is another problem with Windows. It looks like shit. Honestly, you dig into the operating system a tiny bit and you're getting assets from Windows Vista, you're getting assets from Windows XP, you're getting UI elements from Windows 95. Back when I was 2 years old. You can't rewrite these bits, Microsoft, and make them look nice. You're $1 billion company. How is it that Linux user interfaces have a more consistent approach and layout and design than yours does, and you're $1 billion company? Now, I understand for a lot of people, gaming is a thing that they do on their computer, and it's generally accepted that there's no better way to play games on a computer than under Microsoft Windows, but I'd actually like to challenge that today. I'd like to put a word in for Linux gaming, because that has come a long, long way in these past few years, and it's looking as though it is entirely viable to have a gaming rig that runs Linux, and potentially you won't even have to dual boot anything. Thanks to Valve's efforts on the Steam Deck, Linux gaming is easier than ever, because if there's no native Linux version, just try the Windows version on Steam, and Steam will see if it can run it or not, which is incredible. It's never been easier. You don't have to mess around with Wine, you don't have to mess around with any technology. Valve and the community behind this automatically do all the work. You just click play, and it plays. So I 100% recommend you try out Linux for gaming if you are a gamer, because it has come such a long way. Also, Spider Bro and Spider Bro 2 and all of my future games will be native to Linux. I don't want to support Windows. I am obviously going to support Windows because it is going to be the biggest platform for my games, sadly. But I would love for that to change, and I would love for there to be a day when I can go, you know what, I'm not making a Windows version of this. It's not worth it. Now let's talk about spyware, because Windows 10 is full of it. As soon as you boot up your operating system, that thing is communicating with third-party servers, all data collectors, data brokers, advertisers. You are essentially getting keylogged on your computer, straight up. All your information, it's been sold on. I mean, I understand that social media has normalised a lot of these practices, but for me, I think this is horrendous and sets a really bad precedent for the industry. I despise how data has become essentially a product. Now, for this reason alone, I'm more than happy to say use Linux, use a Mac, do not use Windows, because everything you do on that PC is being sent to somebody. Don't know who, it's probably just a bot deciding which information's sellable, which information is best targeted towards advertising. But it's still not great, and it is a disgusting business practice, one pioneered by companies like Google and social media sites, but Microsoft have jumped all in on that, debatably even more so than companies like Google and Facebook have. One minor note I'd like to talk about is Office. Now, everyone has probably had the pleasure or displeasure of using Microsoft Office. It is a staple in our lives, whether it be something you've just used in education, or something you use in your office job, or something you just use. It is in everybody's lives, and we all have to tolerate it. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with Office, except the fact that it is now a subscription for no reason whatsoever. I'd love to understand what's particularly new about these new versions of Office, because I've been using Office since Office 97, I think it was, days, you know, the little paperclip guy in the window, and I have no idea other than tweaks to the user interface. I don't know what else has been brought to the table. What extra stuff is Microsoft bringing in this subscription service that I couldn't have back in Office in the 90s, or Office in the 2000s, or Office in the 2010s before it became a subscription? What is there? You're going to tell me you've added new features to word processing? What are they? Why am I paying monthly for this thing that I used to just have to pay a one-off fee for? To close this segment off, use a Mac or use Linux instead. Give it a try. If you're going to use Linux, for newbies I recommend something called Linux Mint. It's incredible. You will see in moments how much you've been lied to by Microsoft and how bad of a product Windows is. I'm not saying it'll all be plain sailing. There'll be learning curves. There'll be, things you won't be able to run, for example, Office. And why would you? I use something called LibreOffice. It's completely free. And yeah, I'd love to know what Office has that LibreOffice doesn't have. And why do I need it? Why do I need to pay a subscription for it? As far as I'm concerned, I don't. This stuff hasn't changed since the 90s. The Xbox One. What a disaster of a console. Upon launch, that thing looked like it was trying to be the most evil thing possible. It was a console that was claimed to be always online. It took ownership of your games, so you couldn't use a game anywhere else on any other console. Could you imagine a world like that? Had they gotten away with this? Remember, this is what Microsoft wanted for the games industry. They wanted to take away the ownership of your games and lock them to the console. Never, ever, ever forget that. Never, ever, ever, ever forget that. Because it's probably what they still want. Just because they didn't get away with it this time doesn't mean in 10, 15, 20 years they ain't going to try it again with some lessons learned on how to do it better this time. Or at least how to get away with it better. I remember at the launch, all they talked about was television. This was a big feature for consoles. This was the sort of the rise of having computers in the living room. Technically, we'd already had them before in the form of skyboxes and PlayStations to an extent, because you could play DVDs on those. Also, if you live in the UK, there's a thing called Freeview, which is either built into your TV or you have a little box underneath your TV plugged into your TV that runs it. Well, I guess Microsoft decided that they wanted a slice of that pie. And instead of just going, oh hey, we can run streaming apps and you can do things where you control your media or whatever, you can have it in a little box or whatever. Instead of just mentioning that, they made the entire presentation that. The entire presentation was just television, 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 television. Microsoft rocked up on stage and told me that the next generation of gaming at the time was television. And how you could seamlessly transform between video games and television in a moment's notice. Just like my TV remote can do. Microsoft are also in the habit of buying companies a little bit like EA and then eventually killing them off. Let's talk about Rareware. Let's talk about the classics they used to develop for the Nintendo 64. They developed so many great games. You've got GoldenEye, you've got Banjo-Kazooie, Diddy Kong Racing, Conker's Bad Fur Day, all great games. There are so many more that I'm not even mentioning. Rareware were on fire, at least until Microsoft bought them. And then the magic sort of fell apart. I don't know what happened, but eventually it seems that Rareware was just making Kinect games. I hope it was worth the money, Microsoft. Recently, Microsoft has been buying every games company under the map. They've recently bought Activision, and I've been hearing this what I consider an insane take. People have been saying that, oh, don't worry, they're not going to make this stuff exclusive. Microsoft makes money from selling games, not from selling consoles. I'd like to put this debate to rest at all. You're being lied to, okay? I'm pretty certain you're being lied to, and I'm pretty certain that Microsoft will make those games exclusive as soon as they can get away with it. I bet you money that they will. Microsoft do not make money by selling games. They don't make money by selling consoles even. As clear as we've seen from Microsoft Windows, Microsoft makes money by selling your data. And the best data is off their own hardware, always. They have a clear reason to put these games on the Xbox and make them exclusive. And it'll be always boiled frogs. It'll always be boiled frogs. But remember when they said Bethesda games weren't going to be exclusive? And now Starfield is an Xbox exclusive. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, their word is worth nothing, and they will use any and every excuse to be able to put it only on their own system. Just because they've signed an agreement now doesn't mean that it's going to stay like that at all. Let's talk about Xbox Live. Now, before Xbox Live, online on the consoles was a little bit of a desolate thing. The PlayStation 2 had an add-on, I think the GameCube had an add-on, a few games supported it, but not many. The original Xbox was a pioneer, but they also did something that I can never ever ever forgive them for, and that is normalising charging for online services. As for the new Xbox, the tower thing, I don't even know what it's called, like Xbox One X or something. This next section is called Games for Windows Live. I don't know if anybody had the displeasure of using this service, but essentially it was like a competitor to Steam, if we can even call it that. It was essentially a software gatekeeper for your games. All it did was get in the way, insist you sign in an account, it'd send you around in circles eternally. One of the worst pieces of software I've ever had to use, and I used Windows ME, and that was bad. That was really bad, that operating system, but my days. Games for Windows Live. Be thankful that Microsoft ended that. I don't think they really had a choice, to be fair, because everybody hated it, and I'm pretty sure all the developers really resented having their games use it. It was not a good system. Now we're taking it really back. We're going to talk about Internet Explorer. One of the worst browsers ever. Straight up. What Microsoft did there was try to gatekeep the internet to their own operating system by having exclusive technologies that websites would use, such as ActiveX. If a website used ActiveX, you could only use that on Windows, that website. You couldn't use it on any other platform. Even if it ran Internet Explorer, they still kept it exclusive to Windows, which is insane. So you could be using Internet Explorer on a Mac back then, which was a thing, and you could not use ActiveX technology. Why? Because fuck you, buy Windows. And this is where we see the true philosophy of Microsoft's business approaches, I think. It's release shit software, force it down everybody's throats, and then make sure that we cannot escape it ever. I remember using Internet Explorer 6 during the days of high school. I personally back then actually used Firefox, because as soon as I realised that existed, it was like, oh my goodness, this thing is quick, it uses tabs, it's got a clean interface. You know, Internet Explorer had so many toolbars installed. It was so easy to accidentally install a toolbar, especially for someone not understanding computers. And it wasn't uncommon to see, as soon as people launched Internet Explorer, it'd take forever because they'd have like 6 toolbars. None of them were needed. I'm glad that got phased out, I really am. But the fact that it took them so long just to update Internet Explorer to include tabs, which I think eventually arrived in Internet Explorer 7. All the way through the XP and Vista era, it feels like they completely neglected that technology as soon as they had a firm grip on it. And that is Microsoft to a T. It's to claim something and then just keep it as it is. No innovation, no plan for the future. God bless Firefox. I encourage everybody to use that as your browser. Thank you for watching me complain about Microsoft and how I think they're the worst company ever. As far as I'm concerned, their slogan should be dreams turn to dust. Please find the time to try out Linux and open source software in your life, because I guarantee you it's actually much better, at least in my opinion. And I hope you have a really good day.